This is Eric Rattan of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew McKay Smith.
Thanks so much for tuning into the show. I've got a killer conversation to share with you featuring a Melbourne-based musician called Christos Athanasias. He's in the group The Ugly Kings. He's the guitarist. It's out right now, the new album from the group. It's called Strange, Strange Times, because that's exactly what they are. Very weird times, and we talk all about that. Plus his overall philosophy toward playing the guitar and indeed recording music. This is one of those conversations that is the reason I do this, because Christos and I, we go there on so many subjects, too many for me to mention in the introduction here, so let's get to it. Here he is, Christos Athanasias from the Melbourne group, The Ugly Kings.
I've spoken to a bunch of musicians from Melbourne over the past year and a half or however long we've been in these bloody lockdowns. And I've got to say, I'm getting the vibe that people are absolutely fed up with.
Like this latest one now, as in like from last 2 weeks or whatever it's been, I'm losing track of time. But this latest one has hit me probably the hardest, because it's just like, we knew we had an issue. We knew that we were going to this like quick fix kind of thing. Yeah. And then we haven't gotten there. And now it's kind of like, oh, here's another week and here's another week. And by the end of this latest announcement from today, it's probably going to end up like 6 weeks with a week break. So it's kind of like where we were last year. We don't have the high cases we had last year, thankfully, but, from a restriction perspective, it's the same. And then having that, we had shows planned to start from last week. Yeah. Right. And having to release an album now, in the midst of lockdown and not have any shows that we can, we have shows booked, but we're like, now we've got to reschedule stuff from next week onwards as well. Right. So, we'll put October at the present point in time as a starting time frame, and then see how we go. I think
it's not good enough from our elected officials, our combined elected officials, mate, the way they've managed this. And I sincerely hope that they are just on this issue alone, because it's such a big one, that they are just absolutely punished at the next poll. Like the three state governments on the eastern seaboard have just fucked it up so badly. And I'm on the Gold Coast, mate, and people are hurting economically because they run small businesses and people can't go to restaurants and stuff. And, you can't go to restaurants just means you can't go to the bar afterwards, which means that you can't sort of reward the kids the next day with a day trip to, Cold Rock or whatever it might be, the usual family
Absolutely.
Fun stuff.
Yeah.
And it's none of that stuff has been built into an economic recovery plan. It's just, we don't want any deaths. It's like, no, we don't want any deaths, but let's look into this a bit deeper. The comorbidity factor is at something like 95%. Nobody dies from COVID alone. You've got something else. We know that nobody's telling, and excuse me for saying this, but nobody's telling morbidly obese people that maybe you need to stay inside. Maybe you're the ones, and I'm not just picking on them. I mean, I've got a chronic health issue with colitis, which is similar to Crohn's disease. So I've effectively got a comorbidity myself. So I'm including myself into that bracket. But if I had to stay inside, per doctor's orders, per public health policy, so the economy, the mums and dads out there, the small businesses, the bands, I've talked about this so much, could get back to doing what you're supposed to do. Fair enough.
I'll live with that. It's hard. Yeah, it's really hard. And it's really hard on a lot of people. But I don't know. We'll honestly, we'll have to play by ear and see how we go, and hopefully we can get our vaccination numbers up as well, and in that way have some level of protection. But
well, Poland's helped out on that front, so hopefully that's not just Sydney; it's the eastern seaboard. But look, let's get it stuck into the music, because I truly enjoy what you guys are doing. I'm not just saying that. Chris contacted me and said, look, have you heard these guys? And I said, yeah, because I make sure I listen to everything Chris and a few other people who I like, that they send through. And I truly enjoy what you guys are doing. I didn't have to work hard at it. Sometimes that happens, to be honest with you, but I didn't. I'm a rock and roll and a metal fan. So he sent me across the 3 lead singles, which are Strange Times, which is the title track to the album, Technodrome, and The Devil Comes With a Smile. Now, look, given the sounds that you're mining across those 3 cuts, I'm not saying they're similar, but there's a narrative there. There's a sound narrative there that sort of links them all together. That it must be indicative of what the entire album sounds like. So because people might not have heard you before, I can do the descriptors. Sorry, use proper English. But it's always better if I ask someone who's actually written the songs to do it. So can you describe for people listening the gnarly rock sound you've created?
Thank you for those words. So I'll start maybe with 3 names as influences from a guitaring perspective that I have had from a very young age, and of course leading on to my 20s. So Tony Iommi to begin with from Black Sabbath, Jack White, and Tom Morello. So from my guitar pushing the boundaries perspective of guitar playing, those 3 I think were instrumental in my thinking about what I could do with a guitar. I'm not saying that I'm anywhere near the level of those 3 players and what they did for the music industry, but those 3 were my personal key influences from a guitar sound perspective. And then coupled in that, and more so in recent years, I would say, it's the Queens of the Stone Age type of songwriting.
Yeah.
So from a sound perspective, you've got this kind of like Sabbath elements, this garage rock elements of Jack White, as well as then you've got this kind of like weird effect in certain areas, sounds of Tom Morello, and then blend that all together with a baritone voice from our singer who's kind of like a Jim Morrison's kind of vibe, or some people would say Danzig as well. I mean, he prefers Jim Morrison to Danzig personally, but coupling those things together, that is our sound. So this like hard rock, garage rock, blues influence, and then when before our bassist actually joined the band and he saw us live play at the Bendy here in Melbourne for the first time, he straight up said, "This is what I would call power blues."
Yeah.
And that is what we have gone for from a genre description since that time that he actually joined the band. But then you've got all these other subgenres that sort of like fit into that realm, because we're not a classically blues band. We have the influences, but then we also have got that power element to it, that sort of heaviness to it.
I also heard Blue Cheer, Vince Bussaruptis. I heard that. And they're probably the first ever heavy metal band. They predate Sabbath by about 3 years. So if you get to check them out, I think their album came out in like 65 or 66.
Right, okay.
The template's there. You'll hear it. It's like, oh, shit. Yeah. It's like, you know the band Fu Manchu, obviously.
Yes.
The Fu Manchu sound like them. So when you hear them, you'll be like, oh, shit, I've heard this before. It just got reinvented in the mid-90s or thereabouts by Fu Manchu and even Melvins and some of those other bands. But I can hear it in your music, but it's the power blues thing. That all comes from Cream, Eric Clapton, I think. Yeah. And you've got that going on, and I love that. I think I'm a dyed-in-the-wool fan of what you guys are doing, and because to me, this is rock music for every occasion. This is because it's not that I'm not saying that you couldn't have people with this, because you probably could. That's a gnarly to be able to do, because music should always be the thing that tells people to, go ram it up your ass. And you could easily do that with your music. But there's something else about it that says, I'm 4 or 5 beers into my evening. We're about to hit the vodka. You know what? I'm going to put on Strange Times.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. That's really cool.
It's good, man. It's a sort of thing that I wish I heard a lot more often, I've got to say. I came into my inbox and, there's, in addition to the Queens of the Stone Age vibe, I'd probably add, you've definitely got, for obvious reasons, the them Crooked Vultures thing happening as well.
Yes.
In just the crunch, because it's a bit crunchier than Quetzal.
Yes, you're right. And actually, I love that album, Them Crooked Vultures. The other album that I think personally is like, it's a masterpiece of songwriting, is the one he did with Josh Homme did with Iggy Pop, the post-pop depression.
Yeah,
I love that album, and I love that album a lot because of that real deep Iggy Pop voice now blended with kind of like a Queens of the Stone Age bed. Whereas you've got Josh Homme, traditionally he's not that much of a baritone. I mean, he's got pretty deep voice, but he's more towards the high end. But then you've got this kind of like Iggy Pop coming in with that full-on sort of like deep baritone style, and complements what Josh Homme can do from a songwriting perspective, I believe, really, really well. So, those three projects, like you've got Queens of the Stone Age, you've got Ben Crooked Vultures, and the Iggy Pop album, were definitely influences from a songwriting structural perspective and melodic standpoint. But then, from an overall guitar sound for this album, we went with more of that punchy mid-tone kind of heaviness to it. Yeah. Whereas previously I like a lot of reverb in my guitars, and I do that live anyway. But it's the previous album had a lot more reverb going on, both from a guitar perspective and a vocal perspective. Whereas this one, we sort of went for a bit more of a punch.
Let's talk. I'm a muso too, as I think I stated up top. So let's talk about the guitar sound, because that to me sounds like a guitar sound that you've laboured over for thousands of hours to achieve. You know what I mean? Like when you were 12 and 13, you had an idea, and it's just, I know I'm 30 years, almost 30 years into playing. Actually, I am in 30 years into playing the bass. And only in the last 12 months have I achieved the bass sound that I like, you know?
Right. There you go.
So for you, was it a case of trying different effects with different guitars and different amps? And can you talk me through how you achieved that excellent sound that you got?
Thank you again for the compliment. So it was actually, so when I first, let's put it this way. I first started playing electric guitar when I was growing up in Greece, and I didn't really get I got maybe like 3 or 4 lessons, right? So then we left Greece, family situation at the time. We came to Australia, and I didn't get any guitar lessons. So I just played at home with a little practice amp and a Fender Strat at the time, a Squier Strat. Yeah. So I liked obviously always the distorted sound. But then, over university, and I went there for a long time, probably 6 years overall, I completely stopped playing the guitar, right? I don't know what happened. Certain things happened, personal situations. I stopped playing the guitar. So then I started picking it up again after I started working, as we mentioned earlier, after I started working at Ericsson. And it was just an acoustic thing. When we started the Ugly Kings, it was actually an acoustic project. And we had another guitarist, right? So we didn't really have any full-on heavy ambition or anything along those lines. But eventually, Russell, the singer, he plays drums as well. So he sat behind the drum kit, and we were doing a very kind of like White Stripes kind of sound. And we had 2 guitarists. He was playing a standard kind of beat, let's say, so that he could sing at the same time. And then I was using I bought my first big amp, as in like this, an amp that I can jam and gig with, which was a Fender Hot Rod DeVille 4x10, right? I love that amp, but it was way too loud.
410,
honestly.
Yeah.
It was way too loud. I mean, for gigs, I could not go above 2. Sound guy was like, "Oh, turn it down," and I still get that. Sound guy says turn it down always, but then what happened? Then the other guitarist left the band. So for a period of time, when we actually brought in a drummer, so he left the band, and for a period of time, I was just the only instrument beyond the drums, right? So we didn't have a bassist. So then I thought, right, I'm going to do this thing. And I had watched a rig rundown of the Black Keys, right? Yeah. And he uses like 3, I think, amps stacked together. And so I was like, I'm going to try this like multi-amp setup to have a bigger sound, because now I'm the only member in the band, right, that can produce a guitar sound. So then I went down to the 3-amp split, and then eventually I went down to the 2-amp split. But it was from that moment that I decided to use more than 1 amp in my setup that a completely new set of possibilities opened up, right? So I've always loved the kind of octave sound and also that kind of synth sound from a guitar, right? Yeah. So then what I did, instead of one of the key decisions that I made back then, instead of putting the splitter so I can get two different sounds out of two different amps and have the same effects go through them, instead of putting the splitter at the end of the chain, put the splitter at the start of the chain. Mm-hmm. So my guitar goes into the splitter, then I have two completely different effects going to the two different amps. And so then I stack pretty much octave upon octave. So there's certain sections in songs where I would have like 3 fuzz pedals on and like 3 octave pedals running at the same time. So, and the way that from that point then crafted the sound is that I would sort of pick up a pedal and I would see what I would do with it. Then I would go and research a few other pedals, and then I would sort of like build it up over time to the point now that I think, well, you know, it's there's never an ending story to the amount of gear you can collect. Keep collecting gear and keep on trying things. The most recent one that I bought is at Third Man Records, and what was the Game Changer Audio, the plasma coil.
Wow. Okay.
So it's a high voltage pedal, but then partnering with Third Man Records and Jack White, they sort of like had some kind of like octave presets as part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there are certain pedals, like I've got an Angry Fuzz pedal, it's called, that is no longer being made by Visual Labs. And I use that to stack it with overdrive pedals, and it produces this like real high octave crunchy sound that I can't get out of any other pedal. Just a combination of pedals. So, and I use that a lot in certain choruses and so on, for example. So it's been an organic process, but the biggest turning point in decision making was first my love for octaves and synth based guitar sound, and two, to use multi-amps and split my signal to different ways and different effects going through each one, and sort of working it out as I go of what could be really cool to do.
Look, I'm not encouraging you to give away any trade secrets, but I'd love to see you do a rig rundown on YouTube.
Oh, dude, I've been thinking about it. Honestly, I want to do it. Yeah, I want to do it.
Because the thing is, though, and this is, I've had people come on the show and they're like, no, man, I'm not going to fucking do that. It's like, look, countless times of people, like I think it was it Van Halen, Tony Iommi's definitely said it. Billy Sheehan, the bassist, has definitely said it. Steve Harris has said it. It's like, yeah, we used to do this thing where fans could come up and they could play, the actual bass is going to play on the night, or the guitar is going to play on the night. And you give it to them and they go, this isn't it, man. It's not it. And of course, they give it to Billy Sheehan or Van Halen or Steve Harris, and he'd do his thing. And he'd go, oh, that's the sound there. It's these things. It's your hands. So you can never mimic something. There's that, this is an adjacent point, but there's that classic story in Al Jorgensen from Ministry's book about what he did for Fred Durst. Have you read that book?
No.
Just quickly, and anybody who wants to read the book, tune out for the next 30 seconds or so. But Fred wanted to achieve the vocal sound that Al had done on Thieves, which is very, very distorted. But like Frankie Palmieri from Amur, it's actually, most of it is in his voice and just the way he holds the microphone and the vocal tempo. And so he ends up putting Fred through this thing where he goes, well, you know what I do, Fred, to achieve that sound? I take all my clothes off. And he made Fred jump through all of these ridiculous hoops till eventually the engineer cottoned on to what Al was making Fred do.
That's crazy.
The script is in the book, but of course the point is he couldn't achieve the same sound, even though he's using the same vocal effect, the distortion box that Al uses to achieve the sound that he's so known for. It does come down to your spirit, to your soul, to your vocal timbre, to the way your hands, we all compress differently with our fingers. I've often thought that. But that's an awesome rundown. And you know what I like about that too is it's so well thought out. This isn't an accident.
Yeah. and I mean also, and I think part of, and I have to say this, right? Part of my guitar sound is my lack of knowledge of traditional guitar playing. So because I never sat down to actually learn the guitars and here are the notes and here's the scales and here's everything else. So I just picked up the guitar as it boils down to it, I just pick up the guitar and play what sounds good to my ears. Now, how that happens, it just kind of like happens, and obviously practice over time. And then coupling that with the fact that I love effects, right? But if you were to, come to me and say, oh, here, give me a solo in G minor, I'll be like, I've got no fucking idea how to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry to swear on the show.
No, swear as much as you want. So swear as much as you want. But I'm kind of glad you say that too, because, and this is a point that I like to labour over to an extent, which is that music is about feel. And I've spoken to Al Di Meola, these sorts of guys, Don Felder from the Eagles. Don Felder wrote Hotel California. I spoke to Al Anderson, who wrote the guitar line of No Woman, No Cry. These are guys that know how to do solos in G minor. But that's fine. That's the way that they achieve their sound and their output. The vast majority of people that I talk to, including myself, I mean, look, if you gave me half an hour, I could probably do it. But, and you using apps and stuff and just figuring out patterns and shapes and stuff, but not natively. It's not in me, and it doesn't need to be. And it's whatever suits you, mate. And there's no point being self-conscious about these things because you can't change who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And to the point that it's actually quite funny. Discussing this very point with our bassist Nick over different points in different times over the years, and I'm like, well, if I do actually go and learn properly how to play the guitar, would that actually limit my capability of doing what I'm doing now? Because then I would know more, or would it open different horizons? I think it's probably the latter, but yeah. We can park that point because it's been a debate in my mind.
Yeah, well, you're right because you're you, and the other thing is I've got a lot of mates that love golf, and I do too, but they've told me that they've gone to lessons through these guys that are scratch golfers or what have you, because some of these guys are themselves, they achieve par every round. But they've changed their style to the correct style, and they've ended up going through a horrible period trying to relearn their old way because their results suffered as a consequence. It's just one of those points where it's like, fuck it, you got your own style and mine it. I mean, I know I do, and it's like the same thing with podcasts, same thing with your entire life, isn't it? Where's the rule book? There isn't one.
Exactly. That's so true. I agree with you 100%. Yeah.
So the lyrical themes, though, because Chris's presser states that the album is about anxiety, and God, aren't we all feeling it at the moment with these lockdowns? But I like how you go even deeper than that in the presser because, and I'll quote it, the world seems to be getting weirder and weirder every year, and we're becoming more and more in touch with everything that is happening on Earth as it happens. Mate, today, the fall of a country, Afghanistan. And I was watching it on YouTube as it unfolded as Al Jazeera and stuff. And when I could, because I find that whole situation just horrific and horrendous, that what's going to happen to just average fucking people. You know, different people to us, but they're average people. They're just people with kids who just own a shop or go to work and they've got kids and they want those kids to be safe and healthy and stuff. And let's face it, it probably isn't going to happen now that the Taliban are back over there. But so to say the least, your statement that you've in the presser there, I agree with 100%. Look, but from your guys' perspective, apart from writing a killer rock album, what can we do? What can you do apart from, what can we as civilization do? So I'll keep it to more broader. What can civilization do to slow things down and be a touch less vicious toward each other, particularly on social media? Because I felt that was the point you might have been making.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one. So, first of all, I got to say that Rusty writes the lyrics. So our singer writes the lyrics. But from a complete messaging perspective, I believe it is about being consciously aware of what is happening first. So know within myself, like for example, the second single, Technotron, talks about technology addiction, right? Am I addicted to technology? Absolutely I am. I'm looking at my phone all the time.
Yeah.
Whether it is about something with a band, or whether it is just social media, or whether it is work, or whether it is everything, especially in this environment of being in lockdown, my technology use is just like skyrocketed, right?
Yeah.
And of course, it's necessary for my work. It's necessary for being in touch with the band. It's necessary, right? However, there is sort of there is a Black Mirror side of it as well. So, and this is what we say it is about. It's a statement of what is happening. It is not that we are, as a band, against it. We are just making a statement of how we perceive it right now. But what I would say is kind of like, what could we all do is first know consciously that this division is happening, and these things around us continuously fuel that division. So if you know it, you can, as opposed to being kind of like subconsciously just part of it and you are on one side of the camp or the other side of the camp, right? And then you're just fighting the other side. It is more about being conscious about both sides and trying to understand those perspectives and where each person is coming from, or each group or each party or whatever it may be. And then, forming your own mind. And I suppose to a certain degree, personally, I choose not to be too vocal on social media about matters of opinion because of just that fact, the matters of opinion. And my opinion may differ to your opinion about certain things, but I don't need to fight you about it, right? We can both appreciate that we have a different opinion. So,
yeah, that's what's getting lost though, mate, isn't it, these days? And I don't even think it's a generational thing. Sorry, my camera will kick back in a second. It does this every half
no worries.
hour. Silly bloody thing. But just this lack of nuance in debate, this whole idea that you have to be all or nothing and you're on the right side of history and all of this sort of shit, mate. It's this slide into totalitarianism from an opinion perspective. Okay.
Yes.
And
yeah.
This slide into it, it's like I'm 43. I watched Tiananmen Square happening in 1988 or 89, whenever it happened. I saw the Berlin Wall fall in 91. I remember people coming to school. They'd gone to Germany with bits of the Berlin Wall, and we were celebrating the fact that people were no longer living under these murderous regimes. Yet here we have people telling people all speeches, free speech is hate speech and all of this sort of shit at the moment. And if you differ from a narrative, you will get demonized. You can get called a racist or a homophobe or any one of these broader epithets out there by simply not towing what is a conventional line at this point in time. And the way people seem to be so comfortable eviscerating people in the metaphorical sense online, like, the only answer is to switch the bloody stuff off. That seems to be the only way out of it. Like, to use your point about the Black Mirror, to come out the other side of that, you can't completely disconnect. But I do feel that we are moving into a point where social media itself needs to come with a health warning.
Yeah, that's so true, right? Yeah. Because, because it always, the other thing is that it can come with a health warning, and then every time they decide to change some algorithm, it can come with a different warning as well. Like, for example, I remember I was watching this documentary about, I think it was about the rebranding of Instagram, right? A number of years ago.
Yeah,
and
I remember,
and there was a guy there, and he was the guy, one person that literally first came up, a software engineer, first came up with the idea and implementation, of course, with a team of developers, of the endless scroll. You're talking about, like, think about that from a totalitarianism perspective. There's a bunch of people, they're engineers, developing software that have now determined how much time with the endless scroll I spend scrolling times billions of people. Right? How much time are they responsible for? But then, what do you do? At the end of the day, technology is the thing that advances society in any shape or form, right? That's the only actual thing that advances society. Like, if you didn't have the wheel, you wouldn't have the car, and then you wouldn't be able to transport yourself from here to there. And so you had to walk. And so technology is the only thing that advances society, But now on the flip side, it's becoming the thing that kind of like starts to consume society at the same time. But is it better off now than what it was 200 years ago? I don't know. I didn't live 200 years ago to tell you 100%, right?
Yeah.
Because people always, I find, they, even in music, actually this is an interesting point. Even in music, there is no purism. I mean, what is purism in music? It's classical music, potentially. Go and see it at the show. No recorded medium. That's it. Even then, there's technology in the violin.
Yeah, yeah.
And someone says, oh, music, we lost touch because, I don't know, the synthesizer came about. I'm like, well, really? Like, what about the first distortion pedal that came out? People were like, oh, this is not real guitar playing. Like, you should play clean, or you should play just the classical guitar or whatever. So there will always be resistance with technology evolution, I feel. But technology at the end of the day is the only thing that advances humanity. Now it's going to have to be a case of how do we balance that so that it doesn't kind of like fully consume society at the same time. So I think we're just at that, I don't know, turning point, I presume.
Yeah, and I think you've alluded to a broader point there too, which is another good one, which is that it's the rate of pace of change. So say we had the locomotive for 50 or 60 years, and then the Mercedes invented the internal combustion engine, Ford popularized it, okay? We're literally just at a point now with the internal combustion engine where Audi or VW Group have said there will be no more, it'll be all electric vehicles from 2032 or whatever onwards. So we're just at the dawn of that age. But we've had 150 years or thereabouts to get to that point. The problem with social media and indeed these, wherever my phone is, the problem with this is, mate, we've had it since 2007, and I actually call that the BCAD, the new version of it, because I worked at Telstra when I remember selling that shit when it first came out, and I was like, the iPhone, I don't really see how that's going to be much use at the time, but we just didn't know what apps. Remember that? Like we were using BlackBerries and Palm Trios and that sort of stuff, and like the best thing you did was that BlackBerry Messenger service with each other and emails. You got to attach things on email. Like to do that, I remember in 2006 was like, iMate had the Jazz Jam, which is the Dopod Jazz Jam and all this sort of stuff. And older listeners will know what I'm talking about, but the problem with social media is that it's come about, and it's the rate of change that we are seeing, the impact on society of the rate of change of this technology has been, honestly, I've got to say, I think it's been borderline disastrous. Because you've got these. I mean, I know with my kids, mate, I struggle to get them off the iPad if they've got nothing better to do.
Oh no, I know, right?
You know what I mean? Yeah, they like my daughter's literally hitting me at the moment if I don't give it to her sometimes. And I'm like, well, look, we're going to suffer through this because I'm not letting you have it on. You're going to draw and play and go outside on the swings and stuff, and I'll go out there with you. But I mean, at a certain point, especially with me working from home, I've got to let them just sort of be, but inevitably they sort of crawl back to the iPad or the iPhone or iPad or Nintendo's even better, just play Nintendo. I'll say that now, play the Switch rather than use the bloody iPad. It's like a lesser of two evils.
Yeah. And I mean, the next one that's going to come about really, well, I'm not sure how quickly, to be honest, but fairly quickly, I reckon, is virtual reality stuff, right? And then then we are in a real Black Mirror situation. So, because I was with my partner just before the COVID situation unfolded in March last year from a global scale perspective. We actually went for a trip to Iceland in February of 2020, and it was an amazing trip, like once in a lifetime kind of trip, right? Now, after we got back literally 2 weeks before lockdown. 2 to 3 weeks before lockdown first started, or working from home first started in Australia. And now I've got the photos, right, from that trip. And I love those photos. And I love those little videos and memories and whatever is in my head. And I went through that experience in real life, right? Now, if I could relive those moments in a virtual reality kind of world, I would. Right? I personally would. But then if I do, and then my next trip, for example, we're talking about when shit is okay again, we'll go to Norway or we'll go to like Patagonia or something like that, because, something adventurous, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, yeah, but if we never get the opportunity to do that and I've got a virtual reality option for it, would I take it up? What would it be like?
Yeah, I know.
So if I
know exactly.
it's like all these kind of like questions in your mind that then you think to yourself, well, if I can partly experience it virtually, or if I can, I don't know, flick through Instagram, but it's not really flicking through a 2D image, I can actually enter it.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe I will just be plugged into the Matrix forever. I don't know.
But that's where Elon Musk is headed. He's talking about neural networks that way. Elon Musk is talking about doing that, and eventually, but it sort of touches on that broader, which a lot of the Greek philosophers were the masters at trying to get their head around. Plato, Socrates. What is the soul? Of course, they didn't pose it that way, but they're trying to understand. Okay, what are we to? Are we a flesh vehicle that's inhabited, or are we a soul that's inhabiting a flesh vehicle? Is that as simple as the explanation needs to be? Because there's going to be some questions that I think we're going to get. It's going to make things far more complicated if we do, to your point, enter into the matrix, because then we talk about like this is a complete batshit, off to the fringes, but people being able to commit murder in AI because that's all pedophiles and all this sort of shit. It's like, do we just allow it or what? Because it's not real life. Then we have to engage in a completely different set of rules because the moral compass has shifted, because the outcomes aren't for real. But are they for real? Because it talks about, the Bible talks about, if you think about murdering a man, I'm paraphrasing here, of course, because I don't know the Bible that well off by heart. But if you think about murdering a man, you've actually murdered a man. This sort of stuff. What's the difference? And
No, you finished, sorry.
No, that was it. It was just, I'm just saying, we're sort of on the precipice of like, you're seeing how people on social media can be so mean to each other when they're using pseudonyms and burner accounts. Imagine then if that's in AI where it actually psychologically feels real, but they know they can get away with stuff.
Well, even if you take into perspective that, bullying in general, high school bullying or school bullying in general, right? So, I experienced bullying throughout school, just like most kids at some point in time will, right? It was like, the worst of it was, for example, if I go back to my time, the worst of it was grade 6, right? And I was in Greece. It was confined in that time frame of my life, in that physical space, being a kid in Greece growing up and being in grade 6. I went through it. I overcame the problems that came with it, or the self-doubt and, all of it. I overcame that. And I came out to the other side, and now I'm a human being and I'm here in Australia, right? Bullying, though, on a digital world never gets fucking deleted.
Yeah.
It's always going to be there.
Yeah.
Right? So I find that actually worse than being bullied in real life, because what comes with it, the long-term effects of it are technically and potentially always there. Right? So it's almost like your digital signature is more real than your real signature in real life. Because your timeline is kind of always going to be there, and you're sure you can delete your account and all the rest of it, but traces of it are always going to be there. And if you have someone expressing a really negative opinion about you or whatever it may be you do, or, in whatever setting, that's kind of like always going to be there. And I find that even from a perspective of people in the public eye, whatever they may be, it's not an easy thing, right?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's just and I think it's the effects of that in kids growing up, and the effects of that in the general population of everyone online is those scars, I reckon, are going to be more felt when they are in a digital world and then impact people in the, I would call it the real world, than if you just had a period of time that things were shit and you went through it and you are a different space, different time, and it's gone. Digitally, it's kind of like all morphs into the one weird arena, right? So
Yeah, all great points again, brother. I mean, Jesus, there was a situation up here a couple of years ago where a young lady who was the face of a Kubra when she was a child, called Dolly, she killed herself.
Mm.
And she was at a boarding school out at Warwick. And the media, of course, have to be very sensitive about some of the reasons why. But that I understand, and I could be wrong here. I'm only going by what I've read. But bullying that started happening in the classroom and then spilled over to stuff that was happening online. Okay. And I read today it was a News Limited publication. Oh, no, it was Sydney Morning Herald. Being a journo, I subscribe to all of the papers, so I just read them all in the morning, go through the headlines and just see what's there. But I don't know whether they were right in saying it was an epidemic, but there was something like 8 young ladies that have killed themselves this year. And I think the point was, of course, where else would it be but because of harassment on social media and online?
Yeah.
Because I know even my own kids, we've turned off the feature on Minecraft and the other games, Roadblocks, where, the social feature. So they can't actually interact with anybody. I mean, it's not about pedophiles and stuff, even though they're probably on there too. But it's just about the fact that we don't know which bloody kids they're talking to and what attachments they'll develop.
Yes.
The kids that we see them hanging around at school, and the kids have had their issues with some of the other kids at school, but I've looked at that as not bullying. That's just them sorting things out. When they get to your point there, year 6 and the like, when these fucking awful kids realise they can inflict serious damage and get away with it because they're the little Lord Fauntleroy of their household or the Madeline of their household. They're the gifted Wonderkind of their household, and they're used to getting away with shit. See, I went through a boarding school in Sydney. Bullying was so bad at the school that I went to. I've got to be frank, mate, I didn't even notice it. I promise you that as a bullying and like the caste system in a boarding house. Not so much in the boarding house in the broader year. If you were a rugby player, you're up the top. If you're a rower, you're up the top. This sort of stuff. It was like a totem of virtue, And if you didn't have a place on that, you were basically an outcast, and you just didn't even bother trying to become part of things, And the other thing too about like this, and this is not just about me, by the way. I'm just saying that the other thing too that I was aware of completely, and it didn't happen to me, but it happened to kids around me. They were sexually assaulted by other boys. And those boys who sexually assaulted the boys got away with it. It came out. And because it was 1990, 1991, back when people they should have known better, but these people were just like, well, whatever. It's like, they should be expelled, and I think and I noticed that, who was it, the Greens maybe? Who was it? No, I don't think the Greens were that benevolent, unfortunately, that they bloody should be. But they're trying to, Erin Molan, I don't know, being in Melbourne, you probably don't know who Erin Molan is. She's an NRL reporter. So she's being constantly harassed by bullies. And part of me says, look, I'm not saying just because you're an adult, turn it off, but maybe because you're an adult, turn it off. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But she talked about the impact that it had on her, and she wanted there to be, you can't just walk up to somebody and call them all sorts of names and abuse them to the point where they're in tears in real life, because it's actually called assault. Why isn't that the same online?
And that's a really good point. Yeah. That's a really good point.
But this, mate, is where Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, so YouTube, Google, and Instagram being the same. No, Facebook and Instagram being the same company, Google and YouTube being the same company, and then Twitter. So those 3 main companies, they should be classified as utilities, okay? And they should be responsible for the content that is published on them. They had to be, otherwise it's just how do you stop it?
Well, it's going to be a very long topic, that one, because because if you think about it, if they, depending on what level of, I suppose, there's the community guidelines and everything, right? But depending on what level of control they exert in what people can and cannot say, technically they are in control of all communication. So it's a very fine line, right? Because then they can very easily turn totalitarianism, I can't say the word properly. They can very easily turn towards that way, right? Yeah. Because as you say, it's 3 of them, or and then you have the Amazon of the world, and you got Apple, and you got all these these massive companies that control so much, right? And then if they turn around and block certain things from happening, then what else can they block after that? They can and I mean, I see it, simply put, right? I see it from even, a musician's perspective. You try to put up something that relates to you trying to sell a record, and then in order to reach a larger audience, you got to pay money for that, right?
Yeah, well, you're not wrong, and I've tried to get out of giving Facebook my money. Believe me, because I think honestly, we large corporations in general act in a psychopathic way because they're just about increasing revenue and profits. That's it. That's the sole aim of it. Like their sole aim is to stay in business and keep growing the margins for the shareholder. That's it. Like people can argue with me as much as they want, but they're not going to do anything unless it increases their bottom line. It just doesn't happen. This is why when they got all these green policies and these, pro-gay marriage policies, it's like, you don't give a shit. you're just putting that out there to virtue signal, and it's ridiculous. It's at some point though, mate. I don't know. It's the lesser side. It's the downside, I suppose, of capitalism. Capitalism is still the only system that works, though. I mean, it does come down to, and here's the, I'll get back to asking some questions about the music in a sec, but I need to make this final point, which is that it just comes down to people exercising their common sense. Okay. Yeah. And if you recognise that, I agree too, mate, we've all got an addiction to a lesser or greater extent with technology, but step away from the fucking thing. Go swimming with your dog. Go on ice cream with your phone on you. Just something. Go on something like as a break, or otherwise you just sucked into, and you made a point so eloquently before, The Matrix. Yeah. I actually went back to watch The Matrix again for the 10th time, but then for the first time in many, many years. It's always a good movie, huh? Yeah, it's a classic film. It's filmed in Sydney too, I think, wasn't it? From memory, I know a lot of the second one was. I don't know. Anyway, no, Hugo Weaving plays a killer character in that. I like his character in that. Absolutely, yeah. But you mentioned. Let's just talk about the music. You mentioned Danzig up top, and I saw that because I love Danzig, but early Danzig, not weird Danzig. I love that the press states that Danzig are an inspiration or thereabouts. So is it that they're an inspiration, or is it just that your singer's vocal gets compared to that and you've been sort of had that comparison thrust upon you? It's the latter. So, I mean, I like Danzig. I can't say that Danzig is a personal influence of mine. Neither can the singer, and it is predominantly because of Rusty's voice that we get the comparison, and then it kind of like fits a particular mold of, I suppose, listenership. But if we are to really boil it down to influences, not an influence. That's the honest truth. Yeah. That's fair enough. I just love their first three albums, and the Demon Trail Sweat Live EP in '92 or whatever it was, with the live version of Sistina's and Mother. Man, that's I still occasionally. I mean, those are great songs. So from a song perspective, it's almost like saying, in what I mentioned about Queens of the Stone Age, right? They are an influence from a song structure and songwriting perspective and the greatness of the songs that they have. But if I was to really talk about am I personally influenced or inspired by to become, because I always had this thing in my mind as a kid, right? And it always is to this day. Your main role models or influences are like, who do you wish you could have been, or who do you wish you could become? Right? So, and that kind of becomes your role model, because you're like, you look up to that person, that figure, or whatever it may be. So, Josh Homme is great, but I can't say that from a personal perspective, he is my role model guitarist, right? But that's why I said kind of like, Jack White, Tony Iommi, and Tom Morello on the flip side. So I think from a Danzig perspective as well, great songs. But if we were to boil it down to, let's get influenced by Danzig and let's write a song like Mother, that's not a conscious decision. If it turns out that way and it works, right? Yeah. So, yeah. Good at it. Great attitude, man. Yeah. And look, just with these bloody lockdowns again, in terms of, is this all you can do, is just have conversations with podcasters and magazines, online magazines? So there's obviously no gigs that you.
No.
I mean, I know you might have them booked, but I mean, you just can't bank on the fact that they're going to happen. So are you
No,
planning on outside of the interviews? Are you planning on doing any of those streaming events or anything like that?
No streaming event planned right now. No, would kind of, I don't know, prefer doing the live real thing. Although streaming may become the, I suppose, the necessity. But right now it is, either video interviews, voice interviews, written interviews. So from a communication perspective with the outside world, it is that and social media. And of course, the music that we put out.
Yeah. Well, you got a strong merch game. I love what you're doing with Napalm here because, you got the T-shirts and the long sleeves and you got the vinyl and the CDs. So is that something that, I've always wanted to ask somebody this and I've never thought to go there 650 interviews later or whatever, but how does it work for you guys then? Did someone from Napalm go, this is what we think you guys should do? Or do you go, actually, we think we want to do this? Or how does it work?
No, not in this instance, actually. So what we discussed, after we signed a record deal with Napalm, they do their stuff, as in meaning that they're going to do their exclusive edition of the vinyl. There's 2 of those, colored vinyl. Then they do the distribution copies as well, the black vinyl, and then they always kind of like come to the band and ask if we want some, right? So the way that it is that we decide on a color, we decide on a number of quantities, and we pay for that wholesale to the label.
Yeah.
So, in the end, it just becomes a game of retail versus wholesale, right? And we bring a certain number of those copies here in Australia to have at gigs and to be able to sell on Bandcamp. But from a merch perspective, they're doing the cover T-shirt, so Napalm is printing the cover art, the front cover art over there, and as long as we're not competing with each other, as long as there is a different kind of item that we offer here in Australia, which was that different design, which actually comes from the song Mr. Hyde, the 9th song in the album, then we can go forward and print our own and sell our own, right? But from a record perspective, it's very strict. So they have to print the record and we have to buy from them because we're signed to them. So
it's like a franchise agreement.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Pretty much. Well, it's almost like it's almost like the band in this instance is the retailer, and what other labels do, like for example, previously we were with Cosmic Artifacts, is they would have a certain number of copies from a run that they give for free, and that kind of becomes sort of your license, right? Yeah. So you say, X amount of copies out of a run of X amount, whatever the agreement ends up being, is for free to the band. And then beyond that point, you can buy wholesale from the label as well. So then you kind of have this pool of copies that you can sort of make back some of your money from from recording and so on. Yeah. But Napalm being a bigger label, they work differently, and they say, right, so we'll give you an advance to record the album or portion thereof, whatever each agreement ends up being. And but then when it comes to, we'll give you the artist copies as in for the band, that's for free. But then the rest of it is a wholesale retail kind of agreement.
Wow. I had no idea. There you go. Yeah, I was waiting for someone to break it down like that, but I guess that makes sense from their perspective. Okay, they're a business and they're trying to make money, and no matter which band they're dealing with, they're trying to make as much money as they possibly can. But what about the promotion then? Does that fall under them, or have you guys got to do that?
No, that falls under them. Yeah.
So they've got to take out the ads on Instagram and Facebook to promote the album?
Yes, but I mean, of course, if I want to put money of my own to do the same as well, then I can do that, and I do that.
Yeah.
So because I mean they will do what they feel is the right thing for the level of band that we are, and what I was told to begin with, and this again makes because my full-time job, I'm a business guy, right? So this makes total business sense. They said to me, we don't go investing like hundreds of thousands of dollars in a new band, because if we did that for every band, we wouldn't be in business. They sort of like go step by step and they gauge what the market response is, right? So it's almost like, capping the investment to a degree so that then they don't lose too much money from all these artists they're trying to promote, right? Because you don't know which one is going to be the success in order for them to make the millions of dollars or whatever as a label, right? So they have to gauge it, and it's totally fair enough, right? At the end of the day, they have to make money too, as you said.
Just as long as, like, you constantly hear about, I was speaking to Kurt from Metal Church? Anyway, I can't remember who it was now, but like their hit albums from the 80s or even the 90s, I don't know, I can't remember if it was Metal Church or not, so I won't use them as the example. I was speaking to a band who told me they only started making money recently from record sales or album sales, whatever you want to call it, because the deals that they signed back in the day were so bad they were completely weighted toward the label. So if this does break out and one of your tracks ends up being used as the lead cut to the new Dexter series, this sort of, but things happen like that. This is what happens.
Absolutely.
But it happens in 15 years' time. So like what Quentin Tarantino does, where he goes and finds all this old stuff, some Australian stuff as well, and he's like, I want that in my movie. And, of course, then it ends up selling a truckload because it's in a Tarantino film. I just hope you get that opportunity to renegotiate, but I know they're probably not going to be that benevolent, are they?
It really depends. I mean, there is I'm not going to mention the exact agreement, but there is a time part to the agreement.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So, I mean, it's not an insignificant amount of time, let me tell you that much.
Sorry,
but,
my battery's gone. Oh, no, it's back up. There we go.
That's okay. But honestly, there's two ways of going on about doing things, right? One is a total independent way, which 100% is what we were. And we were signed to, Cosmic Artifacts purely from a physical perspective. But we kept all our digital rights prior to this point, and we still do. We still have all the rights to our back catalog, right? So there is no Napalm involvement or label involvement there. But at some point in time, you've got to make a decision and say, if you've got an opportunity, do you take it and see where it takes you?
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah.
Or do you just continue on as you were, and then kind of what to expect as an outcome, right? Honestly, it's been a lot of work, this album, especially the time frame of releasing it. So, because we only recorded it in between lockdowns in like late February this year, finishing the mixes and the masters and the artwork and getting the thing ready for pressing and actually releasing it now in August is was a pretty crazy feat. And having to deal with a variety of new people and more people and coordination of all the different aspects of it, it was a lot of work. So a lot of work on top of, full-time work, right? Yeah. So it doesn't come like, now I'm signed with a label and all is sweet, and the next thing is just this great level of success that's just going to miraculously come to me. That's a complete bullshit myth. You got to work for it, and whatever good thing comes from both sides, both because the label works for it and the band works for it. I think if you just have the philosophy that she'll be right, she won't be right.
Yeah, it's not right. Yeah. Well, nothing. You won't sell anything. You won't reach an audience that might be impressed with what you guys are doing. That's for sure. Yeah, it's a tough game, mate. But I mean, we're musicians. It's what we do.
Yeah.
What else are we going to do? Except if these underground, these gnarly. They're not even gnarly. Sorry, they're shit. Some of these underground black metal bands and stuff, like the Attitude, they don't want anybody to find them. It's like, but then they're still on Instagram or what have you. It's like, what are you doing? Never quite understood that. It's like when I was a kid growing up, I was a big death and still am, but big black and death metal fan when I was a kid, especially like back when you had to really work and find the music. You had to get it in from you had to order it in, or there was like 3 record stores in the country that had stocked the early Immortal albums or what have you. But I quickly learned that the bands that I could read about in the magazines were the bands that were worth following, because I bought a bunch of shit underground stuff that just was crap. The truth is, it copies the bigger stuff.
Yeah.
They're not like some undiscovered gem. You're like, wow, nobody knows this exists, and it sounds like Master of Puppets. No, that doesn't happen. If it sounds like Master of Puppets, it probably is Master of Puppets. Or if it's Toxic Waltz by Exodus or something like that, then all those bands get big because they produce great quality songs that is well produced and can connect with an audience. And I'll round up with my final point by saying you're definitely doing that. I hope it happens for you, given the hard work that you've put into it. But
thank you.
You come out the other side of this. I'd love to see you guys up here in Queensland playing.
Oh, absolutely. We actually do have a show booked in Queensland. So,
really? When?
Hopefully it happens. I'm pretty sure it's actually the first weekend of October. And what I was saying before in regards to the run of shows that we had, I mean, we were meant to play last Saturday. My Saturday just passed. We were meant to be in Sydney, right? Obviously, that wasn't going to happen. Actually, people have been messaging even right now. There is hell on the bay that we're supposed to be playing September 4th here in Melbourne. And the current lockdown ends 3 days before it. So anyway, there will be a decision made for that very soon. So that is probably the next show that will get either played or rescheduled. And that's where we're kind of tossing now whether to just go for an October start. And if we do go for an October start, then Queensland is the first one.
Okay, were you playing on the Goldie or in Brisbane?
Both.
So Mo's Desert Clubhouse or Vinnie's Dive and then Mansfield.
So it'd be Vinnie's and it'd be Lefties.
Okay, I'll go to the Vinnie show. Yeah, because that's near.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm halfway. I'm in the cane field, so I can sort of go either way, and it's sort of 45 minutes to everywhere. But Vinnie's, I've never been to Vinnie's. Can you believe it? Just with the lockdowns and stuff. I mean,
yeah.
And young kids too. The other thing is young kids. I had this rule where if I could meet the band, I'd try to get to the show. You know what I mean? And so the last show I've been to was Corrosion of Conformity, and that was a good show to finish on.
That was was that March or Feb last year?
February 2020. Yeah.
Yeah, February. Yeah. I remember that. I remember that run actually. Yeah.
Yeah, wow, I met the guys backstage. I actually met them literally. The tour manager contacted me and said, "Hey, the guys are ready now," and I'm like, they just got off, but you don't question these things, but I'm thinking they've just gotten off stage. And I walk in there and Pepper and the guys are just toweling down. And I'm like, fuck, I'm so sorry. They're like, no, shut up, man, come on in. And I'm like, yeah.
That's amazing.
I'll just sit in the corner. And no, they were very cool, man. All of these big American and British bands that I've met are very cool, man, when they tour.
Yeah.
You know, when you're playing Crowbar doesn't exist anymore, I don't think, in Queensland. But when you're playing toward
they've transferred to... What is that other venue? The Brightside.
Yeah, Brightside.
Didn't they? Yeah, weren't they meant to take over Brightside from a management perspective or something like that?
You're right, they were there because I saw it. God knows how many gigs I saw at the old Brightside on Brunswick Street, and then at the old Crowbar on Brunswick Street. But then they took over the venue that Brightside were in. I thought it lost a bit of the vibe, though. To be honest with you, there's something about walking downstairs into a dungeon. You know. You feel like you're in a fire trap.
We've played there before. It's fantastic, actually. Yeah.
Great sound. Yeah, killer sound. And then you got the backstage area upstairs. It looks like a living room, an old worn out living room, you know. And it was a good vibe. Just Brightside's a bit bigger, or, you know, the venue that was Brightside is a bit bigger. I saw a heap of bands there too, like Rings of Saturn and Corrosion of Conformity, and I don't know how many other bands I saw there, but lots.
Yeah.
But it's a bigger venue, and Crowbar did have the up and downstairs. But anyway, I don't know. I was seriously, I don't know whether I've shared this on the podcast before, but let's do it. I was thinking about opening up a venue in Mount Gravatt, which is on the south side. But it's a couple of $100,000 to sort of guarantee everything. It's a lot, mate. It's far more money than what you think in terms of the licensing and then staff costs and stuff. If you want to keep it going for more than 8 weeks.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. Right now, it's a really difficult time to do that, right? But in my mind, anything you want to start, if you want to open up a coffee shop, that's $200,000. Kind of like, I think a couple of $100,000 is for any of those kind of businesses is probably a necessary a good enough estimate before you go into it, just so you have a ballpark figure in your mind of what it would actually cost. I mean, I haven't taken that step or thought process for myself at all. I never actually worked in hospitality personally, so whereas the rest of I think the rest of the definitely the bassist and the singer have worked for years in hospitality, but I'm not sure about the drummer actually, if he ever did in his younger years. But it's an industry that's so heavily impacted right now. It's really sad. It's really sad to see. I've got a lot of friends that are either in the music industry, soundies or photographers or people at venues themselves, owners of venues. It's horrendous, right? And then as the flow and impact, you get all the artists as well who can't actually have to rely on everything online.
Yeah. You're not wrong, mate. But look, you can only do your best. Well, four guys have certainly done that. So look, congratulations on a killer. Well, I've heard the 3 songs, as I said, but I know the album's going to be a killer album. So I'm going to congratulate you on the album all the same. And
thank you very much.
We can catch up and have a beverage when you get up here, mate.
Absolutely. I'll be looking forward to it.
So that was a good one. That was a chat with Christos from the Melbourne-based group The Ugly Kings. Just a reminder, they have a new album out right now. It's called Strange Times, because indeed it is. My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith, and I'm the host of this little podcast venture that's called Scars and Guitars. If you could like, subscribe, share, and do all of that shit, I'd appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, I hope you have a good one.